Hello everyone and welcome to this video. In the last update, the Stormworks developers gave us 3 new pitchable propellers, and it feels like it is a Christmas gift from them. Today is Christmas, so Merry Christmas to all who celebrate. Let's take a look at how these new propellers work, how they relate to the old propellers, and do some trial runs, so follow along. But before we begin, I do want to say on my server here, on my Discord server, there's been a lot of new developments, and primarily we have a new administrator. Lord Bison has stepped up to the administrative position, and with that he will become the leader of the build challenges. So currently, this is something we've never done before. We're actually hosting 2 build challenges. We got a mini build challenge, which is for a modular motor, so be sure to check that out. And then there's a holiday build challenge where you can create either a container that is in a holiday sort of festive way, or an RC car. So those 2 build challenges are currently on my Discord. Be sure to check them out and join if you are interested. Now back to the feature program here. So what I've done is recolored these 3 new parts in blue. If I just select them here, you can see I've selected the first one here. It's called a small pitchable propeller. It is a small boat propeller with controllable pitch. The standard number input controls the propeller's hub, allowing you to affect its pitch, and power is used to propel it forward and backward. So that's what this can allow you to do. And we have then this one here, the medium one, which is just called a regular pitchable propeller. So it's not called medium, called pitchable propeller. And then we have this massive one, which is called a large pitchable propeller. And interesting enough, it is huge. It is almost the size of a helicopter rotor. It is by far the biggest propeller that we have in the game, the old largest one being this one that I've just colored in dark blue. So you can see the size differences here. Now I'm going to get into the difference of all this stuff I have laid out, but I just want to show you that this pitchable sort of input, right now it's 0, and as we control this, these propellers sort of rotate, kind of like the helicopter when you are taking off with the collective, so you can do that. So that is what these new ones do. They have the one single input. If you press on the logic node in data, you can see the green pitch input for the desired pitch amount. So that is sort of what these ones give us, right? On this first sort of part of the board, what I've done is laid out comparable sized propellers. So with this small pitchable propeller, we currently have the thruster, which is of a similar size. We have this one, which is a large propeller, and we have our very small propeller. So these, call it 4, are more or less similar sized, but there are some key differences. And just on that note, what is quite interesting is as you draw around this, you could see that the size that this propeller takes up is a 3x3 grid. So it takes up a 3x3 grid. Now I've confirmed that putting call it these blocks all around it does not affect its performance. It's still going to operate even in this condition, which leads me to believe this is maybe a glitch. The developers probably should have made this the whole thing smaller instead of having kind of glitching this area, even though it only takes up a 3x3 spot. It's a little strange in my opinion, and that just from a sort of practical standpoint, like it should probably be like this is what I should probably be able to fill in color wise, not the closer bits. So this would probably be a fair sort of open span, what I've drawn in here, rather than this, unless they made the whole thing smaller. So a little sort of strange, I guess, but not the end of the world. Compare that actually size-wise to the ones next to it, just for your curiosity here. You could see here, this one, as it is currently, even with this sort of, call it glitch, where it goes into the wall, it takes up a 3x3 area. The thruster takes up a very funky sort of area where the first level is 1 hole, then the next one up is 3, And then the next one up is a 3x3 grid, and it's actually tall. Like, it's quite tall compared to the one level of that small thruster or small sort of propeller here. Now this one, our large propeller, as you have it here, is also kind of allowing you to do this on its ground level or very bottom level, but then the second layer up, it like looks like this. So this one's also sort of glitched, but if you circle here or press the delete button, you can see sort of where these cells are blocking it, and this is a more realistic, call it, size for this. And then of course here we get our single, call it, one sized block. So these are the various smallest pitchable propeller, and comparing it to similar sized propellers. Up here we have our medium one, or what is just called a pitchable propeller, compared to our old largest propeller, which was the giant propeller. Of course, size-wise, you could see that it is physically different. The area that each one takes up is different, so it's not going to be directly transferable. I mean, if you have a ship where this current old propeller fits perfectly, this one will fit it differently, and you can see there's still that kind of glitch where the edges kind of fall off it. But regardless, these two are kind of similar, and as I was saying, this one is kind of unsurpassed in its current size and state. So I don't know if you'll be able to retrofit any of your existing ships with this, because it may physically not have the space required for that. You may have to do some more modifications. Now these propellers are also going to be good for submarines as well, so this is maybe intended for like a massive, call it like nuclear style submarine at the very back, and you just have these huge blades. Now what else is interesting is you can actually modify some other aspects of these pitchable propellers. If you go to the select, you can actually add blades, so you can go as low as 2 blades or as high as 8 blades for all of them. So you can see that we are now adding a bunch. It looks like a flower. What we're going to test is if the amount of propellers changes or affects the speed, max power, that type of thing. Now, this back row is something I've noticed that's quite interesting actually, and that is in the description of these new pitchable propellers, they are severely underpowered. And what I'm talking about is, if we look here at the very first small basic propeller we currently have, this one has a force of 20,000. This small pitchable propeller also has a force of 20,000, which realistically should not be happening. You have almost twice as much surface area, probably more to be honest. So I'd expect this one would be even more than the thruster. Yet the thruster, if we look here, it's 40,000. So I just have these little notes in the bottom, but this is 40,000. So the thruster is double that of this one, yet this one here looks like it has a physically larger surface area. So I'm with the changing or ability to change the amount of blades. If that changes the performance, then maybe it is not in fact a 20,000 limit. Maybe this 20,000 is the force with 2 sort of fins, and then the more fins you add, the more the force is. I'm not quite sure, and if that is the case, this should be a range, like 20,000 to 60,000 or whatever. So these are the small ones, and I was kind of put off by the fact that it is such a small value for something that's quite large in size. I'd probably stick with using the thruster just between this and this. I don't see why I would use this for any purpose that I could already use this. Go other than side thrusters on a ship. Like this would be a good type of propeller to put on a side, call it like a bow thruster, because then you can just operate the pitch and change the amount of which the boat turns, rather than relying on the motor going positive or negative. So these might be a good place to use thrusters, but of course up here you're never going to have a thruster that size. Anyway, what we have here is 20,000, 20,000, 40,000, then this massive one is 80,000, which again, a little ridiculous in my opinion. How can this massive surface area produce only double what this little thing produces. And then you go to this tiny one here, what we called our previous, I guess this was the large propeller. If I press on it here, large propeller, this large propeller is 100,000. So 80,000, 100,000, look at the size difference. And then of course you get to this massive, massive one. This one is 160,000 force, which sounds like it could be a lot, right? 160,000 force. But then if we go to our old largest propeller, it's 200,000. And it fits in an area that is substantially smaller. You could probably fit 4 of these old large propellers in the size of one of these new massive pitchable ones. So I'm not quite sure why the power range is that. Maybe they're going to change it or update it. In my opinion, just from a physics standpoint, it's incorrect. Obviously, in real life, you do have, the curvature of these fins or blades and stuff that could make it worse or better. So maybe these are just terribly designed blades and maybe they have other purposes intended for them. But just from the surface area alone, I don't think that it's quite realistic. But all that aside, they're nice additions to the game. It's always nice to get new propellers, and like I said, for thrusters or for submarines or certain things, these might be good applications that you could use them for. Now, because these different propellers don't have the same amount of force, it's actually very tough to do, call it a size or a comparison to the old large propellers, or in this case, we had currently here these giant propellers, 2 of them, 2 giant propellers, and they put out 200 force. So in order to put something that is similarly adequate, we have to go ahead and put this massive propeller. 2 of them would still not be as much power as what we are currently getting with these 2 propellers. But as a base mark, I want to run this test chip. What you have in here is just 3 motor blocks and these 2 propellers with a gear. So as a baseline, if we give power to this ship here, just electric power, we could see that our speed goes up to around 25. So call it 25. Looking at the conversion we're using, that is knots. So we're at 25 knots for this engine configuration with this style of propeller. Now to get an equal or close to equal propeller, I guess, using these new propellers, we'd have to create ourselves a lot of space. So we're not going to make this thing look pretty. We're going to make it functional and see if this is something that is directly comparable. So we're going to go ahead and put this large pitchable propeller. We'll put 2 of them just the same way. Now I know they look a little ridiculous, but it is what it is. And of course we have to add pitch. And what I'm going to do is add it to the seat, and it'll just be on the up and down arrow keys of the seat will be attached to the pitch. So up and down will be here, pitch and pitch. Again, because they are a smaller force, our gears shouldn't have an issue with them. In fact, it should be easier on the engines or motors to have these 2, but we're going to see how that affects the speed right now. Like I said previously, we're getting 25 knots. Now I'm going to rev it up and press the up arrow key and take a look at this here. We're getting that similar 25, 26, 27. Okay, it's climbing. That's interesting. So maybe these 2, maybe the electric motors were sort of maxing out and not able to provide enough power for the old style engines. But check this out. If we give power and put it in, hold the down arrow key, it goes right into reverse. Hold this and it goes right forward. So this is kind of the advantage of these pitchable propellers. You're never changing your engine using the either up and down, like positive and negative battery, or a transmission gear. So I guess the first test would be to try to reduce the amount of blades and see what happens. We're going to try with 2 first. So previously we were getting 27. If I give it power and hold this, we're back to getting around, yeah, it seems to be at that same 27-ish mark. I mean, I'm not going to test whether it's to the dot, but just as a general sort of look. And of course we're going to drop speed because our battery is dropping. I don't want to run this test with infinite electricity just to keep things sort of semi-realistic. But what I'm going to do is throw on the 8 propeller blades and see what 8 blades are going to do to this creation. Are we still going to hit that 27 speed? So hold the W, so now we're giving it throttle, and then press up arrow key, and that actually puts the pitch forward. So now we've dipped down to that 25, and we should climb up to 27 as we did before. So it seems that the number of blades makes no difference on the type or speed that we are getting. So the blades are physically just visual aesthetic rather than being sort of a functional difference to this propeller system. Now that was visually sort of a bit strange with those massive propellers, but they were a similar number. They were 160 force of the large pitchable propeller, 160,000 versus this one that was 200,000. I want to test a direct replacement, which is this small propeller, which has 20,000 versus the small pitchable, which also has 20,000. So we got to test out this little rib that I've made and see exactly what kind of speed it gets with stock, or call it small propellers, versus then the speed it gets when it uses those pitchables. So I'm going to give it 100% throttle, and this is in the first gear. I'm not going to gear up, so we're maxing our RPMs, but we're getting around 30. And if I throw in the high gear here, we do know that this thing is going to speed up and shoot up upwards of like 60 knots in stable kind of water. So we're getting steady 50, and it's still climbing. So this is kind of the number that we're going to roll with now. So this is quite an easy swap. We're just going to delete these propellers, add some enclosed pipes. Oh, it's not centered, that's why. I'm looking at why the propellers aren't working. And then we're going to shoot it out a little bit here, and then add these pitchables. And just in the meantime, and for anyone interested what is going on when I say that we're not getting it equal, is this. I need to move this over by a few, and then it'll potentially, note this, we got to move this over, show hide move widget. So now this has to be centered on the creation, and once it's centered, then we're actually going to get a nice equal build. Now we'll put the small pitchable propellers. There we go, we got 2 of them. At least because they only take up 3x3, you can have them like this. Otherwise this would be causing a conflict in the middle here, but we got them working. And I have to add this up arrow key to provide pitch to them, otherwise they're not going to work. I will go ahead and actually change it in this case to be sticky, just so I can have it stay where I need it to stay. So we'll do that and jump into the ship or boat rib and turn it on and give it power. And of course now we're not doing anything, but if I hold the up arrow, well, that's definitely interesting. Well, there we are. We're now getting our speed, and if we throw on high gear, it should go up to that 50, so it doesn't seem to affect speed. I mean, it looks a little funny in this case, but you could definitely see that it's 20. It almost seems more powerful than the small propeller, which is quite interesting to note because, like I said, it should be more powerful. It should not be the same number, but it seems to be working quite well, at least in this case. Now, what would be interesting is now I'm going to hold the down arrow key, and I just shot it into reverse. So you can kind of change around the forward and backward motion without using gears, which is sort of the intention for these pitchable propellers. How much use I'm going to get out of them, to be honest, I'm not sure, just because I find them a little clunky and awkward and large, but maybe some users are going to find them exactly what they need. Maybe I'm just old-fashioned or just stuck in my ways, but I do like my current propeller system. I personally would love to see a smaller propeller like this that can be pitchable, or a small propeller like this that you could put on aircraft, or a small propeller like this that you could use. But like, look at this, just how perfectly shaped that is in terms of this hull. So yeah, it would be something I would consider if one of these guys, the new propellers, were twice the power of these two, so then I would just have the one in the middle and it would replace these two. But if I'm having to have two of them, then it doesn't make sense size-wise to fit it in and kind of make it clunky. So that is all we're going to look at in this video. We took a look at if the different amount of blades changes the amount of speed. It did not seem to affect it. We took a look at how they can be used and reconfigured in ships. Of course, there's something to be said about testing them as thrusters and using them in submarines and things. But for my quick and dirty test with my existing ship kind of platforms, I didn't find a significant use to put them in that would replace the current setup of the large propellers or the very small propellers. Let me know in the comments if you have a specific use that you think these things are going to be awesome for, or if you're also a little confused at the force that they are emitting, because I did find them to have sort of an issue with providing a lot of force. The size difference alone, like you cannot replace this pitchable propeller, for example. I mean, so these two more or less should be easy to swap out because they're quite similar in size, right? They're almost like a little different, sure, except this one, like I said, 200,000, this one 80,000, so less than half. So if you were to change this propeller for this propeller, you'd for sure have to have some sort of gearing change or change in your microcontrollers, so they're not directly replaceable. The small ones are, so that's good. The big one is kind of hard to retrofit, so I'm very curious what your take is on these new propellers and how you find use for them. I hope you enjoyed the video, found it informative. As always, thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more content, more creations. I do have the RSV Akimbo, the oil collection ship, on the horizon, ready to be released for you guys. So stay tuned for that. And as always, happy Stormworksing, everyone.